Welcome everybody to Regen's Local Authority Forum on Developing New Renewables. We're just going to wait a few minutes to make sure everyone can join us before we start. Please use the chat function to introduce yourselves and say hi and talk amongst yourselves until we start. Hopefully you can find the chat function. We've got our first chat. Hi, Bron. Great. Dave. Good morning, everybody. And Hannah's introduced herself. If you're having any problems, Hannah's going to be in the background for Regen, dealing with all the technical issues. So feel free to put something in the chat if you need Hannah's help with anything. So it's 2 minutes past. I'm going to kick off and a few more people might join us while I do that. So I'm Poppy Maltby. I'm the head of cities and regions at Regen, and I'm going to be chairing the session today. For those that don't know us, I hope most people do, we're not-for-profit energy experts, and I lead our local authority memberships and our programme of work to support local actors in their endeavours to deliver net zero locally. So thank you so much for joining. And so today we're going to be talking about our paper, which is looking at different models local authorities can use to support new local renewable generation. The aim is it's a bit of a short guide, a sort of 101 on this really important area, and we're hoping today can just spark some ideas and some actions across the country. So we'll just put up the agenda for today. Thank you, Hannah. We've got an hour and a half, and I'm going to be giving a very short introduction to the paper, and then we'll be hearing from two speakers. We've got Sonja Bedford from Bristol City Council, and then Alistair Mumford from Devon County Council, who are going to be talking about some of the work they've been doing, particularly on some of these emerging models in this area. After them, we're going to be joined by a couple of extra panellists. We've got Sean Owen from Greater Manchester, who we think has COVID, but we just thank him for joining us today. Reg Platt from Emergent Energy and Jake Burnett from Communities for Renewables. So we're hoping to have a good amount of time today to answer some of your questions. And if you could use the Q&A function to put in any questions and also to upvote any questions that you've seen that you like and would like us to ask the panelists. So that'll help me review the most pertinent ones and the ones that we can get answers to. So if you talk amongst yourselves in the chat function and use the Q&A if you would like to talk to us. So a quick bit of housekeeping before I kick off. The event is being recorded, and the slides will be made available afterwards. So we'll send those round, as will the link to the new paper. So hopefully you'll be able to watch back if you can't stay with us for the whole hour and a half. So I'll just kick off quickly about the guide that we've done. Why have we done it? We've done it because we need a lot more renewable energy. In fact, the Committee on Climate Change says we need 4 times as much. It's the bedrock really of any net zero plan, and it's a key facet to a lot of local net zero strategies. It helps local actors play a sort of important part in that change, but also to ensure that the local areas are benefiting from the energy transition. So this guide isn't, the local authorities obviously have a really key role as a planning authority, but this guide isn't really talking about that. It's talking about what local authorities and what other actors can actually do as sort of landlords, property owners, or purchasers of power. So why isn't there more renewable generation being built? There are lots of reasons actually, but after many years of a bit of a hiatus, we are seeing some more renewable energy developments going ahead, but not as many as we need. And a lot of this can be put down to achieving a sort of guaranteed price for power. They need the right sort of return for the investment. So you've got the UK government sort of contracts for difference, which supports prices for the really largest developments and offshore wind in particular, but for small and medium-sized projects, the ones that are going to be more local, they can't really access that funding. So these projects need a stable form of income over the medium and longer term in order to access and secure funding. So at the moment, the wholesale price of power is just not stable enough to provide that income. It fluctuates a lot, it's risky. At the moment though, it's really, really high, which is great news, but it hasn't always been at that level. And it's very likely it's not going to stay at those levels as well. But the good news is that if you can get an agreement reached between a demand customer and a generator on a power price, then you can mitigate your risk from both sides, from generation against falling prices and for demand customers against increasing prices. So this should be a win-win, depending, of course, on the price you negotiate. So aside from the power price, for a local authority and region, there are some real economic wins from having renewable generation located there. You've got skills, jobs, and investment. You've got, and if community owned, it's a triple win, as it were, keeping more of that economic benefit local. So there's some really huge opportunities. And through this session, we really want to try and inspire local authorities to support new renewables with some of these approaches and learn, hopefully, from existing projects. So Hannah, if you could put the slide up from the report. Oh, I think next slide. That's it. Lovely. So this just outlines what's in our guide. It covers 3 models that are sort of happening now and 3 emerging models that we're going to hear a little bit more about from our speakers and our panelists. In the guide, we do a bit of analysis about the pros and cons of these relating to sort of cost, local benefit, carbon reporting, and then we'll give you some examples of existing schemes. So just quickly, we've got this sort of vanilla, I guess, or standard direct development of renewables on local authority-owned land and buildings, something that's been done for a number of years. You've got private wires and microgrid developments where you're linking demand and generation directly to make the schemes more sort of less risky and more profitable. And then you've got these sleeving arrangements, which are happening where you link demand and generation virtually and you manage your wholesale price risk that way. Within the emerging models, we cover the sleeving pool, which is an evolution of sleeving that Bristol City Council have been exploring, and Sonja is going to tell us a bit more about. You've got the synthetic PPA. There's a sort of, essentially this could be a local CFD, which Alistair from Devon is going to be talking a little bit more about. And finally, the idea of this local renewable energy tariff, which Regen have done a recent exploration of. So that is the end of my intro, and I'm pleased to say I'm on time. So I'm going to hand over now to Sonja from Bristol City Council to run us through what Bristol have been doing.
Thanks, Poppy, and good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you all. My name is Sonja Bedford. I'm an energy solicitor, but presently also a consultant for Bristol City Council, and I'm working with the energy service, the large energy service team at the council, on supporting them on many of their contracts, including the district heat network and energy supply. But also my main role with the council is working as a consultant on the City Leap project, more of which I'll talk about later. So if we could have a look at the next slide, please, Hannah. Now, I couldn't resist doing a presentation without showing some pictures of wind turbines. Probably would appear in every presentation I do, but these are the existing renewable energy installations which Bristol City Council owns. They were built when the feed-in tariff was a thing, but their existence has also paved the way for all the current work that is currently being undertaken on the council's own energy supply. And the existence of the wind turbines and the solar farm have given the council a real opportunity to look at emerging models and be able to have a profile of demand and generation through those existing renewables over the past 5 or so years, which has helped to be able to see how the council can engage with new renewable energy generation. The next slide is also a picture of the wind turbines and the solar farm, just spoiling you today with the pictures of those. But you can see the land on which the turbines sit. There's plenty of space there for some more renewables. And the council is a significant landowner within the authority region. And there's obviously more space on this site for more, but also Bristol City Council is also giving access to other developers, and in particular community energy organisations, to build on its own estate. So I think a year ago now, Bristol City Council consented to the first large-scale wind turbine in the southwest for many, many years, and that is the Ambition Lawrence West community turbine. And through that consenting, the council has also let the land on which the turbine is to be built, and is looking at purchasing the energy from that turbine as well. So by which facilitating lots of new generation and also paving the way for more onshore renewables and particularly onshore wind, which has been very difficult to get off the ground recently. The next slide shows the council's delivery to date, and as well as wind and solar, there's a significant amount of rooftop solar and more renewables. The council has also built and is expanding a large district heat network, and since this slide was prepared by the Energy Service, in fact, we have taken on another 7 more commercial connections and are expanding dramatically the heat network across the centre of Bristol. And the exciting news on the new renewables front for the district heat network is the council are taking delivery of a 3 megawatt water source heat pump fairly shortly, which will be in the centre of Bristol, taking a feed off the floating harbour. And that's really exciting to move the district heat network onto new renewables, and particularly using heat pump facilities. So that leads me on to talk very briefly about City Leap. The council are very busy with all of the activity to meet their climate emergency and net zero ambitions, but they can't do all of it on their own with the limited public funding and resources that they do have. City Leap is the council's big energy investment programme, and it has a remit, a very large remit, including the heat networks, smart energy system, energy efficiency for homes and commercial buildings, new renewable energy, and much more. Since September 2020, sorry, it's been quite a long process so far, but the council have been undertaking a procurement exercise to identify the future strategic partner for City Leap. And that organisation or consortium will work with the council to deliver more than £1 billion of investment towards Bristol becoming a zero carbon smart city by 2030. We've had a long process. We released a prospectus and had 190 expressions of interest under that. And from that 190 expressions of interest, we've now whittled that down to a short list of organisations and consortiums that will progress to the final stage of the procurement exercise. We're actually down now to 2 potential strategic partners that the council will take through to this final stage. The search will end early next year. And if you'd like to have more information on the City Leap initiative and how that will be delivering more renewable energy within Bristol, there is a good amount of information on the City Council's Energy Service website, and there's a video from the Mayor of Bristol video. I'm showing my age now. there's a clip from the Mayor of Bristol explaining that. But moving on to a more current and interesting topic in relation to delivery of energy to the council and a new model in which other authorities would be able to replicate. The next slide shows the sleeved pool concept. The sleeved pool is a concept being delivered by the City Council's Energy Service, and the reason behind that is it is being developed to secure both zero carbon energy supplies from local generators, but also to support and develop a local energy generation market it's increasingly difficult, as Poppy mentioned earlier, for new generators to find a route to market in order to facilitate financing the new generation. And so this has been developed with a number of reasons in mind. Within the sleeve pool, the generators will supply into a virtual pool, and for the start, Bristol City Council's managed sites will draw electricity from that pool. By pooling all of the available supply, all of the Bristol City Councils can draw from the same source, but it also allows them to have individual contracts with individual generators. And thereby, through those individual contracts, they will be able to manage the pricing for different generation, and also be able to look at attracting different types of generation as well. We're doing this because under the Mayor's Climate Emergency Action Plan, there is a commitment for Bristol to be carbon neutral in their Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2025. And whilst the council has and continues to do a lot of work in reducing its energy usage on the corporate estate, this is never going to get to zero. So there is a real need to decarbonise the supply for its residual energy demand. We can't escape the fact that there's also going to be an increasing demand for electricity arising from displacing the gas heating, and with heat pumps, ensuring that the district heat network runs on electricity generation sources, and also electrification of vehicles as well. You've seen the large-scale generation that the council already owns, and at the moment the output from that generation is exported to the grid under conventional power purchase agreements, which does generate a revenue stream for the council and does allow the council to offset some of its grid emissions. But we're changing those export arrangements from the systems to a sleeve PPA, which will allow all of the output from those systems to be supplied virtually to the Bristol City Council sites. If we allow for some mismatch in generation and demand timing, the council's own wind and solar systems will supply about 21% of the council's managed electricity demand. Now, we know it's possible to contract directly with renewable energy generators to secure electricity supplies using a back-to-back power purchase arrangement. And we've developed the contracts between the council and the generator to procure that output from the generator. And we've also developed the contracts to a second matching power purchase agreement to make the power available to a licensed supplier who is going to be part of the virtual pool to manage the non-commodity costs and grid balancing requirements, and will be responsible for directing the power virtually to the nominated council sites. Through this, we're allowing long-term contracts to be agreed with the generators, which we hope will have the advantage of giving them the financial security they need, and also, particularly with the way that the current wholesale market is going, giving the council assured long-term zero carbon supply of electricity. And that alleviates them from the need of constantly having to renew contracts with grid suppliers. So we've already started this process, and we're under discussion with a number of small local generation sites. The sleeve pool is going to become the primary supply for the council managed sites. It does mean, however, that there are going to be times when there is too much electricity in the pool and times when the amount in the pool is insufficient, even allowing for some storage capacity that we're going to have available to the pool. So there will need to be a top up from the grid. And because of this, we're going to have a licensed supplier involved who will manage the balancing system and grid balancing obligations. We're also going to have a pool manager, which will likely be CityLeap, and that role will be to balance generation and demand between the generators and the sites. We have started the procurement for the licensed supplier, and we've also started the procurement for the generation as well. If we could have the next slide, please. The development of the sleeve pool concept is going through a number of intermediate steps before we jump into the entirety of the supply coming from the pool. Regen conducted a study into the practicalities and viability of the sleeve pool concept, and there's a link at the end of my presentation into that. That was the first step, which showed that despite a number of barriers, that the sleeve pool was a viable concept. We're now migrating the current export PPAs for the council assets to a sleeve PPA, and the sleeve pool will take over from that arrangement next year. We've set up a dynamic purchasing framework to allow generators to contract with the council for electricity supplies. And this is to allow early take-up of generation from local suppliers ahead of the sleeve pool, which will also support the dynamic purchasing framework as well. We'll be able to test the practicalities of this model on a small scale with a limited number of generators and council sites. And as I said, that is already up and live and running. And then we'll expand to the full pool, as I mentioned, as primary electricity supply, hopefully by mid to end of next year. The next slide shows some of the aspects of the current sleeve power purchase agreement that we're dealing with. With the assistance of Burgess Salmon, the Energy Service have developed 3 power purchase agreements for delivery of the sleeve supply and an exempt power agreement. It has been, as all these things are, a slightly more complex process than we envisaged, but with everything in place, we can now move to the next stage of this. In the future, I think it's going to be possible not only for more local generators to join the sleeve pool, but also for other consumers. So not only other businesses within the Bristol region, but also other local authorities and other public bodies to join that pool, enabling the existing pilot to be expanded fully and making available lots more generation. So on the slide now is just a report from the South West Energy Hub on not only synthetic PPA toolkit, but also all of the different power purchasing arrangements and procurement options, which should assist local authorities in looking to do similar things to the work that Bristol is doing. Also a link to the Regen report, and we will now we'll next hear from Alistair, who's going to be showing us more about the synthetic power purchase arrangement and the projects delivered by Devon County Council on furthering their model as well. So I'll pass over to Alistair, I think, or back to Poppy. Thank you.
Back to me. Thanks.
Sorry,
Sonja.
back to Poppy.
I actually have a quick question, one that's just popped up in the chat, although if it would be great if it could go in the Q&A. So it's an evolution of sleeving and the sleeve pool. I mean, where do you see the biggest sort of benefits in terms of the sleeve pool? Is it that sort of multiple generators to multiple demand? Is that, what are the big differences, or what are the differences in the new model?
Well, the new model is designed to be very flexible, and so through that to encourage different types of generation of renewable energy generation to come into that. So we could have existing generators who are already on a feed-in tariff and have sites which are up and running, or brand new generators like the Ambition Lawrence Western turbine who are looking to sell their energy. And through having the ability to directly contract with those generators, we can model and set the pricing through that, which will allow us to have separate contracts, but have a full remit of generation in the pool, which the council can draw from. It will also expand the ability to have different types of technology. So we could have generation from wind, solar, from some of the heat network energy centres as well. And it gives that flexibility, but also gives a larger amount of energy to draw from at different times, which the pool manager will be doing. The council very much wants to contract directly with the generators, because that also gives the additional benefit of the local supply element for them, and means they can reduce and encourage more zero carbon throughout Bristol. Energy throughout Bristol. So there are quite a number of benefits from pooling it rather than doing individual agreements with each generator, although there will be individual agreements, but they'll all be based on precedent documents, so people will be able to see and work out what they're joining up to. I think having the existing generation in the council has allowed them to model how that will work, and how the pricing will work through that as well. So I know Alistair's going to talk a bit more about how the synthetic pricing model works, but we've been able to see and maximise the pricing opportunities, and also get to, I mean, who could have foreseen what has happened to pricing, energy pricing, which has sort of blown all of that work out of the water slightly when we were looking at the pricing for generation, but it still allows the council to also have visibility on what it will be paying for the next 10 or 20 years for its energy as well.
So I think that was the other one, wasn't it? That it allows slightly longer term, medium and longer term contracts, where at the moment the market is more into shorter term PPAs. Thank you, Sonja. I think you also mentioned that Bristol were hoping to share a lot of that, you know, once the pilot's done, a lot of sharing some of the contracts and learnings and things like that. So we look forward to hearing how that's gone.
Yes, absolutely. And, very keen to do
you'll
that.
Be sharing that around. So I think we'll hand over to Alistair now, who's going to be talking us through the SPPA, although I know he has another name in store for you. Thanks, Alistair.
Thank you, Poppy. So Hannah, yeah, if we can go on to the next slide. Great. And then brilliant. Yeah, so my name's Alistair Mumford from Devon County Council, and thanks for the opportunity today to talk about this work. It's a bit of a geeky area, but I think there's some opportunities here. So and really well done to Regen on the paper. It's a fantastic paper and a really useful contribution to all of our work around the climate emergency. So Devon County Council then, like a lot of the organisations on the call today, we've declared a climate emergency. So obviously that's a driver for a lot of work around carbon elimination. We've also got a policy target for 30% of our total energy consumption to come from renewables by 2030. It's currently about 1%, and it has been about that for a while. So we're not really doing much progress on that. So I was sort of came in, and part of my responsibilities was trying to tackle that. So I was trying to think of ways that we could look to increase our renewable generation or consumption or whatever. We get our electricity through the laser framework, which is a spin out from Kent County Council, I think. And my procurement colleagues are very, very happy with that framework. We're getting a very, very good price for that. We could potentially look to go over to a green tariff, but that's kind of cheating in a way. It's not delivering, in my view, additional renewables, which, as Poppy highlighted earlier on, you know, the Committee on Climate Change is saying we want a quadrupling of renewables. So we really want to be generating more renewables. So when I was trying to think about ways to go forward, it felt like a green tariff just wasn't really going to do it. We looked potentially at sleeving, but I say procurement very, very happy with our laser framework. If we're going to do sleeving as well, that's going to start affecting that buying that goes through laser. So that was seen as not being a very popular model to do. And then there was the idea, well, we could, you know, deploy our own renewables, but we've sort of missed the subsidy opportunity, really. So the business case was difficult, lots of investment. We do have our farms estate, so we're very fortunate to have a farms estate. We've got some land, but we looked into those land, and it wasn't really the big enough parcels that you need now, and also they weren't great in terms of the grid. Well, the grid's not great in Devon, although I think now we can just say the grid's not great anywhere. That's definitely changed, but so that wasn't looking great as a way to go. So I was trying to look for new ways that we might be able to do it, so it didn't affect our laser arrangements, but would deliver additional renewables, but also wouldn't need to be procured. I think procurement regulations are probably relaxing a little bit now. So now you can specify that suppliers have to be SMEs, or have to be from the voluntary sector, or have to be based within an area. but that depends on your procurement team's appetite for risk, because the bigger the contract, the more chance that you're going to get somebody shouting at you, or another company saying that it's not fair. So procurement seems to be getting in the way of us trying to deliver local renewables. And we'll talk about some of the benefits, or the main benefit from local renewables, and Poppy touched on it. But, you know, it's just crazy. If we've got electricity, we need to be generating electricity locally, and Devon is blessed with good levels of solar irradiance even on today, so we need to get more renewables in this area as well. And also we've got a really good community energy sector in Devon as well, and Devon County Council is a keen supporter of that, so we'd want a way that really could support that as well. So procurement regulations were getting in the way really there. So we found, if we can go to the next slide, so we found this thing called a synthetic power purchase agreement, which doesn't need to be procured. And I'll maybe talk about a little bit more about that in a minute, but essentially it's a financial instrument. Now, as Poppy said, I've had to talk about this quite a few times now to councillors and to senior officers, and it has always taken a little bit of a while to get it over. And I think one of the things is because the name is completely irrelevant. So if you just click on a little bit, Hannah. So synthetic, who the hell knows what that means? I believe it's a financial jargon. I think you get synthetic other things, but nobody really knows about that. If you click on, Hannah, and you're not buying power. So click on again. So, you know, there's no purchasing of power. This is a very virtual arrangement, really. So that's where we've come up internally with Renewable Energy Finance Agreement. I think that really says more about what it is really. So the synthetic, the Renewable Energy Finance Agreement is a financial instrument. It's guaranteeing a price for a developer, which enables them to go out and secure that money that's out there. So if you just scroll on to the next one. So let me try and put this into context. So this is Devon County Council's current relationship. So we get well, it's not Empower. I need to change the logo on this because they've been bought out, haven't they? But anyway, so we've got Devon County Council, bottom right. They are buying energy from Empower through the laser framework. So they give us energy, we give them cash. We've got a little bit of renewable energy on our assets. So we've got some PV on roofs and things like that, and obviously we get the electricity from that, and it exports any excess onto the wholesale market that's out there. We don't get renewable certificates, but we can claim that renewables when we're doing our carbon accounting. So that's how it sort of works at the moment. If you scroll on to the next one, please, Hannah. So in the proposal then for this renewable energy finance agreement is that Devon County Council, bottom right, still carries on buying electricity through laser. That all happens. So our electricity doesn't change. We still get our bills through laser and etc. However, we then enter into this agreement with a developer, bottom left there, and we say to them, well, we're going to guarantee the income you get for the generation from that site. So we will agree what is the jargon is a strike price. So that's the minimum price that they're going to get for that electricity that's generated. And that would be over a period of time. So anywhere between 17 and 20 years. So the developer then can go away, can say, look, to the bank, we've got this agreement. We know how much money we're going to get. So you can finance this scheme. They will say, yes, that's absolutely fantastic. So they will develop the scheme. So we're getting additional renewables. We haven't had to procure them, so we can make sure that we're working with the developer that's in Devon. And of course, we can always also make sure that they're community owned as well, because we haven't got to procure them. So the developer then goes out each year, goes to the wholesale market and gets a price for the energy that they generate. They then sell that generate and they get that income back. Now, the important thing here is the strike price. So what we're saying here is Devon County Council is guaranteeing the price that they're going to get for that electricity. So when the developer goes out to the wholesale market, so say the strike price is £55 per megawatt hour, when they go out to the wholesale market at the moment, they'll get loads more than that. So it'll be fantastic. However, they don't see that bonus. That bonus comes to Devon County Council, so that bit of surplus. However, if they went out to the market, I don't know, maybe everything's going to rebound soon, and the market was saying, no, we're going to give you less than £55 per megawatt hour, then they would come to us and say to Devon County Council, you need to top it up. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is what was the expected wholesale price for going up till 2035. Obviously, there'll be a massive spike there. I don't know when BEIS are going to be bringing out their next forecast of energy prices, but it'll be really interesting to see. So we can see in the left, that little circle, at that point, when the developer's going out to the wholesale market, the price that they're getting is below the grey line, which is the guaranteed price, the strike price. And so at those moments each year, Devon County Council would be having to top up the payments. So we'd be giving a little bit of money to the developer. However, from year 2025 or 2024 onwards, they're going to be getting more money than the guaranteed price. So Devon County Council is going to be generating an income through this. And so that sort of shows you then that there is risk and there's also benefit to this, really. Let me see if we go on to the next one, please. So again, these are the curves, or the forward price curves from BEIS. So they give a sort of mid one and then a high one and a low one. So we look at those three scenarios. If everything goes along the way that BEIS say, which you never know, but that's the way, then over the period we would be looking to generate an income of around £37,000 per year based on 2019 money. So from our finance point of view, or my finance colleague's point of view, it's pretty much cost neutral. So we could be setting up an arrangement which delivers, we're looking about 20 megawatt peaks, so say 20 gigawatt hours of generation that would cost us generally nothing. Now there is risks, and if everything goes, if energy prices drastically fall, then there would be a cost to Devon County Council, and that could be in the region of 5 million. If energy prices went completely and utterly ridiculous, which is as they are at the moment, then there would be an income of 4 million. So it's quite a large range there, from cost neutral to 4 million and 5 million. But I think what generally that sort of suggesting with this is, what you need to compare this to is the cost of developing renewables and also the cost of carbon offsetting, which is going to be increasing over the next few years. Now, I talked a little bit about the benefits. Just one thing I wanted to mention, there is a paper which I can make sure is, Hannah, you can send out to everybody, but we had an assessment done of the socio-economic benefits of community energy, and that determined that for a given, I think it was 100 megawatt solar PV farm, that the community-owned asset would deliver 15 million extra economic value to Devon compared to the commercial equivalent. So there is substantial benefit there in getting community-owned energy, and the Renewable Energy Finance Agreement enables us to do that. It's really cost-effective carbon elimination. So you can, in your carbon reporting, you can, in your scope 1, 2, and 3, you can put it in scope 2, I think it is, as your renewable, because it's additional, because it's renewables, you can do that. So it eliminates carbon emissions in terms of your footprint. So the next steps for it is we're very grateful to South West Energy Hub. They've helped to fund getting some a toolkit together. So we'll have the heads of terms and all of the stuff around there, and also what needs to go in to give us the assurance that that generation is going to be community owned. So that's all moving through. Having said all of that, Devon County Council hasn't agreed to do it yet. We're just waiting for it to go to Cabinet and to see what they say. But we've had heads of services say that they think it's a good idea. So fingers crossed for that one. If you just move over to the next one, Hannah. So just in relation to local supply, I know I've only got 5 minutes. This stuff is, this bit of work is even newer than the Renewable Energy Finance Agreement. So again, this one sort of came about, and there's a really good section in the Regen report, and I've nicked their picture here. But essentially, we were looking at ways of trying to increase the value of renewable energy, maybe by decreasing the amount of charges that are put on when you're generating and consuming energy within a locality. Could you reduce some of the grid charges? After quite a long period of time, it came to the conclusion, no, that's not going to happen. And Merlin from Regen, bless him, was always sort of quite simple. Yeah, it's a nice idea, it's not going to work. And he always said that what you want to do is to actually try and put a premium on locally generated renewable energy. And it was a very good idea, and I should have listened to him the first time he said it. And we've been working with Tamar at Regen to work on that kind of an idea. And so what we've come up with now is what would you call it? A sort of terms and conditions. So we want to go out to the local supply market and say to them, the licensed supplier market, and say to them, look, could you set up a tariff where you could offer a better price to generators, probably a premium, so people would have to pay more as a consumer, but they would be getting locally generated renewable energy. And so we've got a number of aspects in there that we're looking to test with them around, what sort of price could they give to the generators, what sort of uplift do they think that there would be going on there as well. But I think there's something there. I think there is a market around that would probably pay a little bit more for their renewable electricity. I don't know how big that is. We have spoken to some licensed suppliers, and some of them think actually there may be ways of doing it without an uplift, but it's definitely something to be looked into further. And we hope to be launching a sort of advertisement so that we can have an open advertisement of the opportunities to licensed suppliers later on this month. But I think from their point of view, we think it creates sticky customers, so reduces their marketing costs. From our point of view, it should enable the development of more renewables, because they'll be getting that slightly higher PPA price from the licensed suppliers. So I think that's probably it for me, Poppy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alistair. That's really useful. You've got a load of questions, and I'm rather struggling to decide which one to ask you now. And obviously, we can ask some more in the panel discussion. I guess the key one was, has this happened yet? Have any other councils done a synthetic PPA?
No, don't tell Devon County Council, but no other council has done it.
So we're looking for Devon to be the trailblazer on this, but I agree, it sounds like a really fantastic idea. It's essentially...
Sorry, probably just to add, though, there is one organisation that has entered into a synthetic power agreement, and that's Ernst & Young.
Right.
And they're the first one in the UK, but there are lots in America, I believe. Jake may well be able to give more reference to that as well.
Yeah. It sounds like a fantastic structure, and in fact it is. Someone was asking what the difference is between that and a CFD, and essentially it is a sort of local CFD. It's not run by the UK government's low carbon contracts, but it would be run by I guess a local authority, or actually any local organisation or public sector, or any organisation that would like to do that. So that was really useful. Thank you, Alistair. I'm going to take us into our panel session now and introduce Sean, who I hope is still with us, who's head of low carbon at Greater Manchester, just to give you a little bit of background on what he's doing.
Good morning all, and thank you all for taking time and trouble this morning. I'm Sean Owen, I'm head of low carbon for Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and first I want to welcome the comments we've seen in the chat this morning, the two presentations, which I'm not going to repeat on. Here in Greater Manchester, we have the same problems, what you've heard from Bristol and equally down in Devon, but we've been working on the last 18 months on understanding what our pipeline should look like and how we could build one. So we've put a lot of effort into looking at our public sector owned land, what we could do with that land, and then equally how we would look to procure that. So a lot of development activities gone in. Equally, we've been taking lessons from Alistair and Sonja and others around the country about how we should then progress that. But we've been working primarily on the procurement exercise and the development piece. We think we've got an opportunity of order of magnitude of about 150 megawatts of potential ground mounted PV, battery storage and other smart energy assets that we can deploy. and we'll be looking to take that forward in the next 6 months through a purpose-built framework, which we are currently out to tender for now. So please don't ask me questions about the tender, as I'm duty bound not to talk about it, but we can talk about that a bit before that. Poppy, if there's anything else, I'm quite happy to pick that up as part of the panel.
No, thank you, Sean. And to introduce also Reg from Emergent Energy.
Thanks very much, Poppy. Thanks very much for the report and the chance to speak. Great to see that this discussion is happening. So my name's Reg. I'm the founder of emergent.energy. We develop financeable renewable energy projects for social housing. So we do so using a microgrid approach, where very simply we create locally managed electrical networks, connect local solar generation to those local networks, and then use those local networks to supply customers, so social housing residents, with locally generated solar PV, and that can be to supply power for their lights and appliances, and also their heat pumps, their EV chargers, and so on, as those technologies come more into the market. And the benefits of the approach are, there's kind of 4 main benefits. The first is that we're able to supply that solar to those householders at retail prices, obviously getting a far higher investment return than you can achieve just through a standard export arrangement, where you'd be selling at wholesale prices. Secondly, we can sell at cheaper than standard retail prices. So for the customers of the schemes, they're able to enjoy electricity bills which are substantially lower than they would get from a licensed supplier. Thirdly, we're able to share the benefits with customers who normally wouldn't be able to access the benefits of solar PV. So think, in particular, people say who live in flats, who've never had the opportunity to benefit from solar PV previously, now can. And then the last main benefit is that the customers can always switch. So there's some kind of other sort of solutions out there looking at solar and batteries around these types of contracts with customers where customers get locked in through sort of PPA arrangements. So this isn't one of those. It's kind of central to the principle of what we do, that the customer always has the right to switch away. So the work that we've been doing on these to date, so we've got 9 existing energy systems which are live today. That's with Gateshead, Nottingham and Brighton and Hove City Council, so supplying around 230 customers. And on those schemes, we're seeing around about 25 to 30% bill saving for customers, and returns from those schemes, which mean we're very confident that we can get fully financeable new solar schemes away in the right types of projects. And it was on the back of doing those schemes that we recently got a regulatory sandbox award from Ofgem. So it's the first of its kind in the energy industry, which is enabled us to do a new approach to managing effectively the settlement metering in relation to microgrids. And that's resolved a particular issue we've encountered in our first projects, making the whole solution a lot more cost effective. And on the back of that, we are just on the cusp of launching to market an offer for to participate in the first at-scale trials of this solution that we've developed. So we're looking to onboard up to about 2,000 more customers through trials particularly focused on solar PV being installed into existing blocks of flats. And that's going to be, but the participation for councils and large RSLs will be on a fully funded basis. So there'll be more information about that in about a week's time on our website. And just a quick, just one sort of reflection, I suppose. Sorry for going on too long. Just, I think it's a fascinating conversation, actually. And such great innovation to hear from the councils you've got represented today. I'm particularly interested, I suppose, to see that there's so much is possible within the regulation today. And often it's seen as there's so many barriers in those areas, but perhaps there are still barriers in those areas which would be quite interesting to hear about. And the synthetic PPA idea sounds very, very interesting. If councils can take that sort of strategic role to underpin financing costs, that could have quite a transformative effect on the sort of projects that we're looking at.
Thanks, Reg. And then I'm going to go to Jake, who's from Community for Renewables. You're still there?
Morning, everyone. So Communities for Renewables, or CFR, is a not-for-profit company, and we help communities and local authorities set up their own local energy enterprises and help them develop, finance and manage large-scale generation to be run for the benefit of the local community. We've helped to deliver community solar projects with a capital value of about 60 million. Some of those have been developed from scratch. Some of them have been acquired from commercial developers, either pre or post construction. And we have a community energy asset management team that looks after 50 megawatts of community solar across Somerset, Bucks, Wiltshire, Sussex, Shropshire, and Warwickshire. And we're working on a number of new development stage subsidy-free projects, ranging from small scale 1 megawatts up to 60 megawatt schemes. And some of those have become partnerships in various ways between a community energy enterprise and the council. And I want to give you one case study, which I think illustrates the opportunities that have been well set out in the Regen paper. It's a new solar farm being developed in Plymouth as a partnership between Plymouth City Council and PEC Renewables. PEC Renewables is the energy and income generator for PEC Trust, which is a charity which works to address fuel poverty in Plymouth and transform how residents in the city buy, use and generate their energy. PEC Renewables has installed 2 megawatts of community-owned solar PV across 32 roofs in the city, and they've developed a 4 megawatt solar farm on a brownfield site, which has been operational since 2016. And those projects have been funded through about 2.5 million in community shares and around 5 million in loan finance from Plymouth City Council. This new solar farm is on a former landfill site on the edge of the city. It's got potential capacity of around 13 megawatts, so should generate something like 13 million kilowatt hours a year of electricity, and it will cost around £7 million to build. It's subsidy free. It should go to planning early next year to build in spring 22. And the partnership between, it's likely to become a joint venture, but that's still being worked out. But the roles of both parties are fairly clear. Plymouth City Council is the landowner, and they'll receive a commercial land rent. They're keen to purchase the power through a long-term PPA, probably a synthetic PPA, that will provide them with price certainty and a long-term supply of green power. They may also be the long-term senior debt provider on bank rate terms, and they should be able to generate a surplus between what they can borrow money from the Public Works Loan Board and what they can lend to the project at commercial rates. PEC Renewables is managing development of the project because that's what they do. They've raised 140,000 of development investment from the Government Rural Community Energy Fund, and they will raise part of the long-term capital through a community share offer. And the solar farm is projected to generate something like £3 to £5 million of surplus income over its operational life, and that income will be used by both PEC Trust and Plymouth City Council to support local climate emergency, energy and fuel poverty projects in the city. And I'll put the link to the project page in the chat in a minute.
Thanks, Jake. That sounds like a great example. We're going to go on to some questions now. I've got one here from Chris Granger, which is sort of asking around, has the market moved now too far towards the sort of short-term PPAs to go back? So what are you thinking in terms of the future for the sort of length of PPA agreements? And I guess actually it would be useful to get some comments from you, I think, about how the market has moved recently in terms of the higher energy prices. Is this something that's going to be really good for renewable energy, and how does this impact what councils might do? I'm going to ask that to Sonja first, to hear back from Sonja.
I knew you'd do that just as my dog had started and managed to keep him quiet. I was like, oh, I'll go to someone else first. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question about length, because we do all bang on about, this is going to achieve longer term PPAs, greater security for the authorities to be able to manage their energy pricing. And we, in the recent in the last sort of 6 months, we've seen renewable energy generators being able to switch out of PPAs and actually maximise the benefits from increased power pricing. So that does have an effect on how we look and model the length of term for the power purchase agreements. Because we've got the live procurement at the moment, although it's for a shorter term contract, the aim is still to go out to 10 years and longer on the power purchase agreements. But the beauty of of doing this is that we can keep that under review, and if it seems that that's not maximising the benefit of the pricing, then we can shorten those down. But the main reason Bristol wanted to go, well, two main reasons, which the obvious ones that Bristol wanted to go to the longer term arrangements, is because we were told from the community energy sector and the local generators that they needed that long term in order to secure initial finance for the project. So I think if we turn that around, and if those funds and banks and organisations which are funding new generation say that they don't require that long term and they can invest in that new generation on a pricing risk, then great, fine, we'll go shorter if we need to, because that was supposed to be, the benefit from that, because we haven't seen funders in the market actually going to new generation. Oh yeah, it's fine, you get a 6-month PPA and we'll lend you £5 million to build your wind turbine. So I still see that as a benefit, but also from the council through hedging, being able to have that security of supply is actually even more valuable at the moment when they're buying on day ahead pricing, which we've seen at this week going up to 200, above 200 a megawatt hour. So I think that additional benefit as well. But yeah, it's one we do have to keep very much under review. I think we've all been saying for years and years, energy pricing is going to go up at some point. We weren't quite expecting this.
Not quite so fast. So we have a question from Cara. I think Jake has actually covered some opportunities for communities and community renewable energy co-ops getting involved. I thought I might pose that to Sean, actually. I know you've been obviously looking at your site. Have you considered community ownership, and how's that working?
So thank you for the question, Cara. We are engaging with the community ownership models. The current open tender we have now takes into account that we would like to encourage more community ownership. We see it as a key part of engaging with the community more broadly and ensuring that some of these projects actually come to life. And if we, from my perspective, if we're to ignore that opportunity, we'll just see many smaller projects fall by the wayside, because it's actually a mixed bag of projects that we need to bring forward. It's when looking at the land we have across Greater Manchester, I referred to 150 megawatts in my opening piece there, but we recognise that is a lot of smaller pockets of land, and this is going to require portfolioing. And when we portfolio, some of the larger developers are probably not going to want that opportunity. But if they were working with or a community aspect was to come forward, that would play more to those entities there. And I think from our perspective, we can support community groups in bringing that forward, because we're doing a lot of the development piece up front, where we're already reviewing the land assets and we're looking at the development opportunities. So we know what comes forward won't fail from a planning point of view, and we know where the grid connections are. So we're trying to do as much as we can from our side to encourage community energy. But again, it's tough for them. Short of me partnering with a community group, which then rules out many others, I think our approach, it provides an inclusive view of the land.
Thanks, Sean. We've got a question from Michael Brown, who was saying they're starting work on a new local plan. And what should you be doing from a planning point of view to ensure that we set the conditions for encouraging new renewables? So this is slightly away from what the report is, but I wonder whether Alistair or Jake might have some thoughts on that.
On local plans, not my strong point.
Okay. Jake, did you have any?
So I think the question's from Warwickshire, which is probably not the best place for wind turbines, but where wind is a sensible proposal, a very good thing any local authority can do is to designate sites for wind power in the local plan, because at the moment, and I hope this changes in the next couple of years, you cannot get consent for a wind turbine in England. It's different in Scotland and Wales unless the site has been designated in the local plan for wind power and that the project has the support of the local community. So that's the only way to get wind going in England at the moment. And I think if those sites can, if communities can be encouraged to take those projects forwards, then that is also a good thing. The other thing I would say in local policy development, local planning, is Devon have run what I think is probably as good as citizens' assemblies are going to get, and there's some fantastic information on the Devon Climate Emergency website, and the findings are quite interesting. So Devon County Council put 3 questions to its citizens' assembly, which they considered were the more controversial aspects of their net zero transition plan, and they covered housing retrofit, the shift to green transport, particularly away from private fossil fuel vehicles, and wind turbines. And of those 3, wind turbines were the least controversial, and the shift to low carbon transport was the most controversial. So I'd encourage you, Alistair can put the link on the chat, go and find out why that is.
So there's oh, sorry, Poppy, I was just going to add that there's some good examples of local plans. Bath North East Somerset Council have designated wind and renewables and put their targets into their local plan, and then that's in a fairly heritage area as well. And Cornwall Council have also started designating in their local plans for renewable energy. In fact, they early on with the solar development had provision for looking at where that solar would go, and have now mapped that, because there's a lot of ground mount solar now in the region. Obviously Wales slightly different, but they have specific designated wind areas, and unfortunately don't always match with grid constraints, but that's another entire topic.
Thanks, Sonia. One of the questions, I think, Sonia, you touched on it, but I might ask Reg, was the impact of, or your view on the energy sort of price rises and how that's impacting the sort of private wire, the microgrid model, which I know have been developed by some local authorities. Yeah, so your thought, are these prices here to stay, and how would that impact that model?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we can't all be depending on the fact that the prices will stay where they are. It's a completely unique and slightly crazy situation we've seen in the electricity market recently. I think it brings home a few things for me. I think the tenor of discussion and debate has changed quite significantly because of the energy price crisis, quickly followed up by the COP around customer vulnerability. And so something which is important to us is about the just transition, making sure everyone gets access to the benefits of new renewables. And as you kind of teed up with this discussion, there should be a win-win situation here for renewable energy developers and local customers, demand, by bringing together what's a stable source of power and cost for that power in the long term. And currently the situation is that many customers can't access the benefits from those. So particularly we work in social housing, as I've said, and many RSLs and councils see solar as an opportunity to reduce bills and protect customers in the long term from rising prices in the installation of heat pumps. That doesn't work for a lot of customers because they don't have the right properties, they don't have the right rooftops. So having this sort of microgrid approach where you can start sharing the value across local neighbourhoods and communities, for me, is really important in terms of addressing that problem. The other thing it's kind of, I actually picked this up from one of the questions on the chat, which is quite interesting, was obviously we've seen this dramatic collapse in the number of small suppliers. Perhaps maybe the councils who led the way on setting up their own suppliers shouldn't be feeling too bad at the moment, because we've seen such a car crash in terms of all these other suppliers who've now gone under. It would be interesting, actually, it's kind of a question to some of the other panelists, because what seems to be the case in quite a lot of these models is that there's an integral role for a licensed supplier. You don't get that with a microgrid. You're simply a purchaser from a licensed supplier. You can just choose anyone in the market. You don't depend on them to help you deliver your innovation. You're just a customer. And so if you are where you are depending on them to do whatever seeding arrangements or someone you're setting up, obviously the pool of potential parties to work with is massively reduced now. So kind of a question to throw out in a way to others, does that become a problem? The fact that the supply market is now, much more concentrated than it was.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess the sleeving pool is to some extent moving away from using that licensed supplier as the intermediary, but the sleeving and the sleeve pool still has that. Alistair, do you have any thoughts, particularly on the local electricity tariff idea?
Yeah, I don't think local authorities should be getting involved with being a licensed supplier at the moment. And that's the one. Well, they've all unfortunately failed, haven't they? I think so. So the track record isn't great, and it's obviously a very controversial area. But I think on but we can, work in conjunction with the private sector, and I think that's where the local supply tariff could work really well. That a local authority gets a partnership with a local supplier and then helps to facilitate that, and also tries to act on behalf of the citizens of that area to make sure that that offer is as good as it possibly can be, really. And I think that's definitely the role, and does the checks and balances each year to make sure that the agreed key performance indicators are being met. I can see that being an important role. The other one is around the lobbying as well, and yeah, I think that's obviously another role for local authorities, is to try and lobby for maybe changes to regulations to try and enable more incentivization, whether that's through local energy markets or whatever, but yeah, that needs to happen.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, there was a question about the local sort of energy model and and that sort of, the potential regulatory changes, I guess, and requests to the UK government or Ofgem about trying to make these sorts of ideas and projects easier to take forward. I don't know, Jake, do you have any thoughts on what we should be asking for?
I think the energy local model and the kind of commercial or public sector consumer equivalent is, you could say, is the Class A license exempt model. They're interesting, and the ability for community energy schemes to supply power at a reduced cost to local domestic consumers is the obvious thing that a community energy project should be able to do, and as yet it's the thing which is most difficult to do. So I hope there is continued innovation there, and that Ofgem does continue evolving the regulations to enable those models where they deliver both system and community benefits. I think what they are right to be tough on is business models which just let consumers or generators get out of costs which should be socialized, and therefore leave the last town standing paying for the system. So either those social costs have to be shifted onto the taxpayer, or they have to be paid in the current regulatory model. They can't support models that just say, well, we're not part of this anymore, because they are. When it comes to building new generation projects, community or council owned, a new solar farm has fixed capital costs and largely fixed operating costs, and what it needs is a long-term certain price for power. It doesn't need anything fancy, and a long-term sleeved or synthetic PPA contract with a public sector body is the simplest way of doing that, and it's the closest thing to a feed-in tariff or renewables obligation. And that the price it needs bears no relation to the market electricity price. It's related to the cost of building and running the solar farm. Those costs are going up at the moment because of commodity prices. They will come down again. But the projects we're looking at the lower end of the scale, 1 megawatt schemes, they might need a 60 or even 70 pounds PPA to make them work. But they have wider benefits. At the mid-range, 50, 55 pounds, the larger end of the scale, 50 pounds or less. Those are kind of reasonable prices compared to the long-term average. They look pretty good compared to current prices in the 1 to 200 pounds level.
Poppy, if I
The
can
challenge I
add,
see is local authorities can only buy a certain amount of power, so they can kickstart a certain amount of generation in their area, but to get beyond that, you need to bring in commercial and domestic consumers.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Sean quickly. I know you've been working on a local energy market project in Greater Manchester. From your perspective, how does the regulation or government help or hinder that? And how have you been getting around that?
So GM was one of a number of areas around the country fortunate to get funding from Innovate UK for SLES detailed designs. Our local energy market is breaking it down into 3 phases, really. It's breaking it down into short term, what can we do now? So that's the discussion we're having now. What can we bring on board? But in the long term, we recognise the need for regulatory change, and we're currently building up that picture now to enable that that peer-to-peer trading, that ease of sleeving energy. At the moment, it can be done, but you are reliant on the suppliers that you're using currently, and it does make it quite challenging. The advantage I have here in GM is that we simply are quite large and we use an awful lot more energy than some of others on the call. So the amount of energy we can purchase is quite significant. So we've got quite a base load there, 10 districts, and that's before we even talk about households and so forth. But as it stands now, in first quarter next year, we'll be bringing forward a paper to go to Ofgem, and we're working with Ofgem as part of the programme to actually say these are the regulatory changes that need to happen in the what we're calling next and future, because it's those things that need to happen. And if we do generally want to enable more of this energy, it is that deregulation in certain aspects, but equally then just making it simpler, taking on board the points of the other panellists. You know, the number of companies that have gone by the wayside is significant. Do we intend to become a licensed supplier? No. Our view is that there are plenty of people out there that can actually do this. The question more is how do we link those parties that own the assets, be that small, medium and large, to the actual individual at the other end? So if they can't organise a PPA in the first place, what's that market maker piece that sits in the middle? I call it the eBay of energy. What's there? We all know about Piccolos of the world and so forth, but they're at a transmission grid level. They're not really helping community interest companies that may be working alongside RPs. They're not supporting local residents, not supporting districts of any size and scale. So we'll have that in the early next year, and I'd love to bring that back to this group at a later date and say this is where we are, and hopefully look for more insight from yourselves as well.
Fantastic, that would be great. Alistair wants to come in.
Just highlight something that Sean was saying about simplification, and I think, you know, supposedly there are other countries that come over to look at the way we do our energy markets, which I'm amazed. But anyway, you know, there was some bastion, and a simplification would be good. You know, you look at the smart meters, which seem to have lots and lots of benefits, but you go over to somewhere where the Netherlands, and their meters go both ways, and that just seems a very, very simple way of being able to incentivize generation on a very, very small scale on houses. Yeah, you just, as soon as it's going out your building, it turns your meter back, and there seems to be some simple stuff that could be done, as well as probably more complicated stuff as well. Yeah. Thanks,
Alistair. I want to give everyone a chance to give some sort of final reflections, and just to bring back to the audience in terms of what we would want to sort of lessons learned, or give some advice to local authorities who are looking at this or have been developing their own. I mean, I know Devon and Bristol and Greater Manchester are a relatively long way down this journey. So I will start, I'll go backwards through our panelists and ask for sort of final reflections and lessons for the people listening. Sonja, do you want to kick off that?
Oh my goodness, yes. Okay. I think it is a difficult marketplace to be in, and there is, as you say, a lot of work by a number of authorities, and there are now good examples from Regen and from South West Energy Hub and a number of authorities on the initial feasibility work. So I think it is more time for action now, rather than doing that feasibility. Obviously, you need to, as an authority, to look at your demand and look at your available assets to see what is possible. But we have a big body of evidence and work that's been done to facilitate other authorities that are wanting to do it. And I think repetition is a really good thing. We all feed off each other, and once we've started and gone through that painful, particularly procurement process, then we shouldn't be afraid of sharing and facilitating each other to do that. I think key also is looking for the authorities to look at at maximising their own estates, as have been highlighted in the report, and engaging with community energy and local organisations to deliver that. The authority doesn't have to spend its own money on new renewables. It can put that out to community fundraising, to bond raising, and then the authority can facilitate that with these new models that we're showing. There are some still, and somebody mentioned in the chat, the rooftop solar side of things is still, even in authorities like Bristol and Devon, and where they've been very active in producing new renewable energy, it's still masses to do. There's still loads and loads to do, and it's seeing how we can make those models work with direct wire arrangements as well. There is, we've got to do a lot in a short amount of time, and so I think now we've done all of the initial work on these new models, let's share it and use it, and join in others where we can.
Lovely, thanks, Sonja. And we will try and add, there's been a number of reports and things mentioned, so we'll try and make sure they're all in the sort of what we send around after this. Alistair, thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, I'm just encouraged. Obviously, slightly depressing week last week or the 2 weeks before, and I think it's just encouraging to see that there are so many organisations and particularly local authorities that are pushing these things through, because this is what we need. We've got to see this quadrupling. So, yeah, and we'll say we'll have a toolkit in relation to the renewable energy finance agreement, which other people can look into use. I think that has its place, but there is a solution for everything now. I don't think local authorities can hide or say that no, there's no way of doing this. There are definitely loads of solutions out there, and I know it is difficult for local authorities sometimes to see or to be happy with the investment that might be made, whether they want to do it themselves or they're going to enter into an agreement. But they're going to see the reality of it. But the cost of not doing anything, when you've got a net zero target, the carbon offsetting costs are going to be ridiculous. This is by far the cheaper way to do it, and as a range of different benefits for, well, even if you're going for the sleeve, the benefits to the UK economy are going to be massive. So yeah, encourage people to do things, really. Thanks,
Alistair. When can we hear about Devon's hopefully agreeing?
Oh, well, yes. So the cabinet leadership team, I think, meets in December, but I don't think we'll get on that agenda. So I'm hoping January.
Okay.
It's going to be very annoying because this has been going on for, well, years now, but we're hopefully getting close to the end on it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alistair. We will watch that space. Sean.
Thank you, Poppy. I fully agree with the comments from the two previous colleagues. I think that the role of ourselves as a CA, a combined authority, districts and the like, is really to convene and it's to provide that information and to fill the gap where the market can't do it. I think that the biggest takeaway that I've got on that point is that we're currently rolling out local energy plans across all of Greater Manchester, which is street level all the way up to network. And what that does is it will be making it very clear to residents, developer, etc., this is where you should consider putting renewables. So first and foremost, bring everybody up to the same level playing field so everyone's informed. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we'll look to create or design the local energy market, so the eBay trading piece, for want of a better word, and then amalgamate all the learning that we've taken from today and the different options and solutions in the middle, because there is no one silver bullet to make this happen. And I'll close on, it's now or never. I was up at COP26 and there were some highlights, but not as many as we would have all liked. So it's now or never to take hold of this and drive forward. So I look forward to coming back in the future.
Great, thank you, Sean. Reg.
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, I think overall it's great to see the sort of the council-led initiatives that have been discussed today. It's like great ambition and taking on some very complicated challenges. Clearly a lot of hard work, and it's not an easy market to navigate. I suppose a reflection on that at the same time is it's probably not for everyone to be able to go through these kind of huge processes. 'em. I'm sure there will be kind of great kind of learning that's shared across the sector. But I suppose a reflection on that at the same time is it's probably not for everyone to be able to go through these kind of huge processes. I'm sure there will be kind of great kind of learning that's shared across the sector. But certainly some of these, there might be an idea to kind of look for easy wins, and a quick reflection, I suppose, on the regulatory side there, because it took 3 years of hard work to get the recent award we got from Ofgem through the sandbox scheme. So it's kind of this quite important piece of regulatory reform, and we're now teed up to get a second piece of reform from Ofgem. And so some of the ideas which depend on regulatory change, such as peer-to-peer, which need a lot of thought, because peer-to-peer is kind of in the long grass for Ofgem at the moment. And the last thing they talked about was the back end of the 2020s, and it's one of those, will it ever come in at all? So these things need to be plotted quite strategically, I think, about how to get innovation into the market, which is commercially viable today and sort of pushes the envelope on what's possible from a regulatory perspective, and the general complication of getting these things through. And so our approach to that, I think, is if you've got something simple that works, get it done, get it deployed, get it moving, and from there sort of grow and expand out. And so I guess final quick plug is that if anyone's interested in looking at the opportunity for getting solar PV deployed across their social housing stock, do get in touch, because that's kind of the big focus for us now, is these very simple projects we can make a big impact quickly.
Lovely, thanks. And Jake, there's been a number of questions about sort of getting communities involved in this, and I know you've had a lot of input in terms of how local authorities can support communities, so it'd be great to have a little bit of reflection on the actions they can take in particular.
I think it's a bigger question of securing the economic benefit of the net zero transition for the locality, and the economic principles of the net zero transition are similar, whether you look at the country level, a locality level, or the council itself, in that there is, as Alistair said, a huge cost in doing nothing, but the transition, whilst it requires investment, is a huge economic opportunity. But you have to be proactive to secure that benefit for your council or for your locality. A council needs to use all its levers to ensure that the net zero transition is done in a way which brings benefit to the council, and those levers go across the planning system, procurement, the council's own estate, investment. And if the council's thinking across those areas, there are lots of ways that it can ensure that the net zero transition benefits the council itself and its community. In the end, renewable energy will bring down and stabilise energy costs, but it's going to be a rocky ride.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, so we've been looking in sort of, well, I guess we've been quite pleased in some respects that the energy price has been rising so much, but yes, it doesn't really help our projects in that that's still risk, and it's still very, very variable, and we don't know what the long term is. So I think the sort of focus of the report still stands in that it's really important to get that long-term certainty and to get those projects built. And as Jake was saying, it's not actually the price of power that determines those projects so much as the price of, or the cost of their land and their equipment, and getting that renewable energy deployed. So we're going to finish a little bit early, actually. There were a number of questions in the chat and the Q&A. There are quite specific questions for sort of Alistair and Sonja and others. So I will ask the panelists to answer those. I think there were things, for example, about how Alistair was going to ensure this, use that value that came back from the SPPA and things like that. So we will endeavour to download those and get some answers from our panelists for you if you had some of those specific questions. But thank you so much to everyone who joined us, and thank you very much to our panelists. It was really great to hear some of those examples, and hopefully we've inspired others to do some actions. So I think I will close it there. Thank you very much, everybody.